Senator Bernie Sanders speaks during a rally in Ames, Iowa, on Saturday. Jean J. Puskar, AP photo.
The Democratic primary remains up for grabs.
A cascade of polls released over the weekend have Bernie Sanders challenging Joe Biden's frontrunner status, surpassing Biden in key early states as the national horse race tightens up.
In total, 6 polls were released this weekend, painting a picture of a Democratic primary that has no clear leader.
A group of surveys out of the first 2 states to head to the polls, Iowa and New Hampshire, have Sanders in a strong position. But other candidates remain within striking distance, highlighting the fluidity of the race with 8 days to go until the Iowa caucuses.
In a poll conducted in Iowa by the New York Times, Siena College that was released Saturday, the Vermont senator sat at the top of the pack at 25%. 3 other candidates were battling for second place: Pete Buttigieg, Biden and Elizabeth Warren, all within 3 points of one another. Buttigieg was at 18%, to Biden's 17% and Warren's 15%.
A second Iowa poll, conducted by CBS News, YouGov, has the race closer at the top, with 3 candidates within 3 points of each other. Sanders is at 26% to Biden's 25% and Buttigieg's 22%. Warren was at 15%.
A survey in New Hampshire, which votes 8 days after the Iowa caucuses, tells a similar story. Sanders has staked out a narrow lead, with a battle for second. A NBC News, Marist poll in the Granite State that was released on Sunday has Sanders at 22% among likely primary voters. Buttigieg was at 17%, Biden was at 15% and Warren was at 13%. Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, rounds out the candidates who finished in double digits with 10%.
A second New Hampshire poll released Sunday gives a wider lead to Sanders. In the CNN, University of New Hampshire poll, Sanders is at 25% among likely primary voters, to Biden's 16%, Buttigieg's 15% and Warren's 12%.
Regardless of who they support, a plurality of voters believe Sanders will win the first-in-the-nation primary. 39% said they believed the Vermont senator will win the state, compared to 22% for Biden and 12% for Warren.
In past cycles, the first 2 states have been determinative for the race for the nomination. A narrow win by Sanders in both states, where he currently sits in pole position, could push him toward the nomination as he builds momentum.
Biden remained in first in a pair of national polls released Sunday, but Sanders has begun cutting into his national lead as well.
A Fox News poll has Biden at 26% to Sanders' 23% among registered voters, bringing Sanders within the poll's margin of error, while both outpace the rest of the field. Warren is at 14% and Mike Bloomberg, the former New York City mayor who is skipping the first 4 states in favor of a strategy focused on Super Tuesday, is at 10%.
Biden's lead shrunk there, compared to a Fox News national poll conducted in early December. In that poll, Biden had a 10-point lead over the second-place Sanders, 30% to 20%.
A second national poll, released by ABC News, Washington Post on Sunday, also has Biden and Sanders closely packed together. Among adults who are either Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents, Biden is at 28% to Sanders' 24%. Warren is the only other candidate in double digits at 11%.
A more restrictive screen from ABC News, The Washington Post gives Biden a wider lead. Among registered voters who are Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents, Biden is at 32% to Sanders' 23%, with Warren at 12%.
In a CNN, SSRS national poll released Wednesday, Sanders was ahead of Biden within the poll's margin of error.
The polling also shows that the race remains fluid.
In the Times, Siena, Iowa poll, just 59% of voters said their mind was made up on which candidate they would support. 39% of caucus goers said they could be persuaded to back a different candidate, with a bit over a week to go until they actually caucus.
Similarly, New Hampshire voters are not locked in. In the CNN, UNH poll, just 31% of Democratic primary voters said they've definitely decided who they're going to vote for. 20% said they're leaning toward a candidate, while 49% said they're still trying to decide.
The polls also brought good news for candidates further down the ballot. Four of the polls released Sunday, the ABC News, Washington Post and Fox News national polls and CNN, UNH and NBC News, Marist New Hampshire polls, counted toward qualifying candidates for the next Democratic primary debate to be held on February 7 in New Hampshire. Andrew Yang hit at least 5% in all four of those polls, helping him qualify for the debate stage. He joins Biden, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Sanders, Tom Steyer and Warren, all of whom had already qualified.
The New York Times, Siena College Iowa poll surveyed 584 likely Democratic caucus goers January 20–23, and has a margin of error of plus or minus 4.8 percentage points. The CBS YouGov Iowa poll surveyed 1,401 registered voters who are Democrats from January 16–23, with a margin of error of plus or minus 3.9 percentage points.
The NBC News, Marist New Hampshire survey polled 697 likely Democratic primary voters from January 20–23, with a margin of error of plus or minus 4.5 percentage points. The CNN, University of New Hampshire poll conducted in the state surveyed 516 likely Democratic primary voters from January 15–23, and has a margin of error of plus or minus 4.3 percentage points. The Fox News national poll surveyed 495 registered voters who indicated they were more likely to vote in the Democratic primary. It was in the field from January 19–22, and has a margin of error of plus or minus 4 percentage points. The ABC News, Washington Post poll had a sample of 388 Democrats and Democratic-leaning independents, including 349 who are registered voters. Both groups had a margin of error of plus or minus 6 percentage points, and the poll was conducted from January 20–23.